I stood there, under the gray Boston sky of an October morning, holding the birthday cake box that I had spent the entire previous night making. The scent of vanilla and chocolate still lingered faintly on my fingers, reminding me of the hours diligently spent in the kitchen. I am Coulter Harrington, 36 years old, an ordinary man living in this city where everything seems to always move too fast. Today is Victoria's birthday, my wife, and I wanted to surprise her. She had just returned from a week-long business trip in New York, and I imagined her walking into the office, seeing the cake I had made with my own hands, with its smooth white frosting and the clumsily but affectionately written words, "Happy birthday, my love." That would be the perfect moment, wouldn't it? Victoria Harrington, my wife, 34 years old. She is the CEO of a renowned tech company in downtown Boston. She is the kind of woman who makes everyone turn their heads, sharp and intelligent, beautiful with long, shiny black hair and a smile that's always radiant in business newspapers. In public, she is the perfect model, a young, ambitious female leader, always appearing in tailored suits and confident high heels. I loved her from our early college days when she was still a dreamy student aspiring to change the world through technology. We got married 8 years ago, and although married life isn't always smooth, I still believe our love is real. At least I thought so. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the cake box from shaking in my hands. Her office building towered high, its glass glistening under the weak sunlight, looking like a symbol of success. I pushed open the main door, stepping into the grand lobby with polished marble floors and the cool air from the air conditioning. My heart beat a little faster, not from nervousness but from excitement. I pictured Victoria hugging me, smiling brightly, and us cutting the cake right there in the office in front of her colleagues. That would be how I remind her that no matter how busy she is, we still have each other. But then, as I was about to head toward the elevator, a tall security guard in a black uniform stopped me. He was about 50 with a gray goatee and stern eyes. "Excuse me, sir, do you have an appointment with anyone?" His voice was monotone, as if he had asked this question hundreds of times a day. I smiled politely, trying to keep my voice calm. "Oh no, I don't have an appointment. I'm the husband of CEO Victoria Harrington. I want to go up to the office to surprise her. Today is my wife's birthday." He looked me up and down, his gaze briefly pausing on the cake box in my hands. Then he smiled, an incredulous smile mixed between doubt and pity. I sensed it immediately, like a light punch to the chest. "Mrs. Harrington's husband," he repeated, his voice dragging a bit. "I see her husband coming here every day and, sorry sir, but that's not you." Those words exploded like a bomb in my head. I froze, my mouth agape but unable to utter a word. "What? What did you say?" I stammered, trying to force a laugh to hide the surging confusion. My heart pounded wildly, blood rushing to my ears. Her husband comes every day? And it's not me? That can't be. Victoria and I live together. We have our 7-year-old daughter Annie, and even though she's busy, we're still a family. Aren't we? I tried to explain, my voice trembling. "You're mistaken. I'm Coulter Harrington, her husband. We've been married for 8 years now. Maybe you're confusing me with someone else. Let me call her to confirm." I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, but my hands shook so much that the cake box nearly fell. He shook his head, his voice firmer. "Sorry, sir, but the rule is no appointment, no entry. And I advise you to leave. Don't make this difficult for me." His eyes were now full of pity, as if he were looking at some poor soul deluding himself. I felt my face flush hot, like being slapped. Confusion, hurt. Those emotions surged in my chest. I'm not a stranger, I'm her husband. But I didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to cause a commotion at Victoria's workplace. So I ended up sitting back in the lobby, on the hard leather chair near the main door. The cake box sat on my lap, and I stared at it, trying to calm myself. Maybe he was mistaken. Maybe the husband he mentioned was a business partner or someone who looks like me. Yes, surely that's it. Victoria will come back and everything will be clear. Time passed slowly like molasses. I glanced at the clock, half an hour already. The lobby grew busier, employees coming and going with coffee cups in hand, laughter echoing. I tried not to overthink, but my mind swirled endlessly. Images of Victoria flashed before me. Her smile when we first met, the late nights we spent together, and the times she hugged me after a long, tiring day. We've had beautiful moments, even if lately she's been busier. This business trip was one of them. She flew to New York to sign a big contract, and I stayed home taking care of Annie, cooking, cleaning. That's my role, and I'm proud of it. An hour passed. I started getting impatient, constantly glancing at the main door. Then suddenly I saw her. Victoria walked in, confident as always, her hair flowing loosely, her black suit hugging her body. But she wasn't alone. Next to her was Andrew, my own brother. My heart seemed to stop beating. Andrew, my brother, 3 years older than me, with a confident smile and a luxurious suit. They chatted intimately, their hands lightly brushing against each other as they walked through the door. The way they looked at each other, oh God, that look. It wasn't the look of colleagues, not of friends. It was the look of lovers, full of affection and secrets. I was stunned, frozen in place. The cake box slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor with a shattering sound. White frosting splattered everywhere, cake pieces scattering like my heart at that moment. People around turned to look, but I didn't care. I stood still, watching them disappear into the elevator, the doors closing without a backward glance. It felt like the whole world around me had just collapsed. The lobby's noise vanished, leaving only my pounding heart and the pain tearing through my chest. How could this be? Andrew, my brother, whom I rarely contact since he left home 10 years ago. He's always been the clever, scheming one, knowing how to win people over. And Victoria, my wife. How did they meet? Since when? Questions flooded my mind, overwhelming me. I slumped back into the chair, my hands trembling as I picked up the broken cake pieces, tears welling up. This wasn't the surprise I expected. This was a nightmare. I don't know what to do next. Call her, rush up to the office, or go home and pretend I saw nothing? But the pain is too great, and the truth, though not yet clear, weighs on me like a stone. Boston out there is still bustling, but for me everything has changed forever. I looked up at the elevator where they had just disappeared. Are they hugging up there? Or is it just work? I tried to convince myself that it might be a misunderstanding. Andrew is my brother and Victoria is my wife. But that look, it wasn't fake. It chilled me to the bone. Finally, I stood up, my legs heavy as lead. I left the building, the Boston wind blowing coldly through my coat. On the way home, everything around me blurred. I don't know how to face Victoria tonight. But one thing is certain. That birthday cake wasn't the only thing shattered today. My heart was too. I walked along the familiar streets of Boston, but today they seemed stranger and colder than ever. The high-rise buildings glided past me like ghosts, and the blaring car horns echoed in my ears without stirring the chaos in my mind. I tried to breathe deeply, but each breath only sharpened the pain in my chest. How could I go home and pretend nothing had happened? How could I look into Victoria's eyes without seeing again the image of her laughing intimately with Andrew? My brother, the man I once thought was just a distant memory, had now become the destroyer of everything I cherished. I wondered if I had misunderstood. Maybe they were just together for work. Andrew is an investor. Victoria is the CEO. Perhaps they were discussing some project. Yes, that must be it. I kept convincing myself, repeating it in my head to drive away the doubt gnawing at me bit by bit. But deep down, I knew the way they looked at each other was not the look of colleagues. It was the look of lovers, and the thought made me want to scream in the middle of the street. When I got home to our familiar apartment on the outskirts of Boston, I slammed the door shut and leaned against the wall, trying to regain my composure. Annie was still at school, and the silence in the house made everything feel more suffocating. I looked around, the family photos hanging on the wall, the sofa where we used to cuddle and watch movies, and the kitchen where I had made the birthday cake now shattered to pieces. Everything was still the same, but to me it had all changed completely. I couldn't let this pain swallow me right now. Annie would be home soon, and I didn't want her to see her father in this broken state. I needed to do something to stay calm. So I decided to cook dinner, as I always did when Victoria returned from a business trip. Maybe this would be my chance to see clearly. If she acted normally, perhaps it was all just a misunderstanding. I opened the fridge, took out the beef, vegetables, and our favorite bottle of red wine. My hands trembling, I started cooking. The aroma of food filled the kitchen, warm, familiar, but it couldn't dispel the turmoil inside me. Every time I held the knife, I remembered Andrew's gaze that morning, and my grip tightened involuntarily. When Annie came home, she ran into the kitchen, her voice bright. "Daddy, is Mommy coming home today?" I bent down to hug her, forcing a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. Now go do your homework. Mommy will be back soon." She smiled and ran off, leaving me with the silent kitchen. I convinced myself again. Maybe Andrew was just a business partner. Victoria was always busy with meetings, and perhaps he was investing in her company. I recalled the times she talked about investors, and I had never suspected anything. But why did they look at each other like that? Why did her hand touch him so intimately? Doubt rose again, tightening my heart. I stood up and paced the living room, trying to think of the good memories. Our wedding day, when Victoria looked at me with eyes full of love, the sleepless nights beside Annie when she was sick, and the short trips we took just for each other. Those images calmed me a little, but they also deepened the pain. If it was all a lie, how long had I been living in delusion? Dusk fell. The weak sunlight streamed through the window, tinting the room red. I heard the key turn in the lock, and my heart pounded like a drum. Victoria walked in, confident and composed as always after a trip. She was still in the black suit from that morning, her hair slightly tousled but still breathtakingly beautiful. "Hi, love," she said softly, kissing my cheek lightly. Her familiar perfume spread, but today it made me nauseous. She looked around the house, smiling when she saw the dinner table I had set. "Wow, dinner looks amazing. I'm exhausted." The New York trip dragged on longer than expected. She took off her coat, hung it up, and walked into the bedroom as if nothing had happened. I stood there watching her, searching for traces of deceit on her face, but there was nothing. She was still the perfect Victoria, the woman I had once been proud of. We sat down to eat. Annie excitedly told stories about school, and Victoria smiled and responded, asking her daughter questions with care. I tried to join in, but every bite I swallowed felt like swallowing stones. Finally, when Annie went to bed early, it was just the two of us. The candlelight flickered on the table, and the atmosphere grew heavy. I took a deep breath and decided to break the silence. "Victoria, I went to your office this morning. I wanted to surprise you with a homemade birthday cake." My voice was calm, but my hand clenched the wine glass. She looked at me, a smile flashing briefly. "Really? Why didn't you call me?" "I was in meetings all morning." I stared straight into her eyes. "I saw you walk in with another man. You two were laughing very intimately." Her gaze flickered away, avoiding mine. She set down her fork and was silent for so long that the air in the room became suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat. Each second passed like a century, tension and suspense rising. Finally, she sighed, her voice quiet but firm. "He's the love of my life. We've been together for 2 years." That answer nearly broke me. The world spun around me, and I felt like someone had punched me hard in the chest. 2 years? 2 years she had been cheating on me while I stayed home taking care of the family. But I kept my voice steady, even as tears welled up. "Do you know that man is Andrew? My own brother?" Victoria froze for a moment, her face paling slightly. But she quickly regained her composure and sighed deeply. "I know. Now that you know, I won't hide it anymore. I want a divorce, Coulter. We should do it quietly." She laid out the details like a business deal. She would leave me the current house, $2 million in cash, and full custody of Annie. In return, I had to divorce silently, make no fuss, and reveal nothing that could damage her image with the company or the media. "I've calculated everything," she said coldly. "This is best for both of us." Her words cut like a knife, severing my last shred of hope. Divorce? After 8 years together, after all the sacrifices? She spoke as if it were a business decision without a trace of emotion. I was stunned for a moment, then rage exploded, my voice choked but sharp. "What are you thinking, Victoria? Do you think money and a house can make up for this betrayal? Do you feel any regret at all after all these years together, after everything we've been through?" I looked at her, unable to believe my ears. The woman in front of me was no longer the Victoria I loved. She stood still, avoiding my eyes, only repeating, "I hope you won't make a scene. My reputation and public image can't be affected. You understand, Coulter?" I growled, tears streaming down my cheeks. "What are you saying? I never thought the person I loved most would betray my trust like this. Have you thought about Annie? About our family?" She didn't answer. Finally, Victoria silently removed her wedding ring, placing it gently on the table with a small but echoing clink in the quiet room. She said nothing more, just turned and walked away. The door closed behind her, leaving me standing in the dark room with my pounding heart and indescribable pain. I collapsed into the chair, my mind blank. 2 years. 2 years she had been with Andrew while I trusted blindly. I recalled the small signs. The longer business trips, the late-night calls, the mysterious smile when she looked at her phone. I had thought it was work, but now everything was clear. Pain surged, mixed with anger and disappointment. How could I sleep tonight? How could I face Annie tomorrow morning? The house suddenly felt vast and cold, like a prison holding my pain. That night, I sat alone in the pitch-black living room, the only light coming from the street lamps filtering through the window, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. I didn't turn on the lights. The darkness felt fitting for my mood, a darkness that enveloped everything, swallowing the once beautiful memories. In my mind, childhood memories surged back like a raging river, dragging me into a past I had tried to forget. Andrew, my older brother by 3 years, had always been a clever, scheming boy, gifted at charming others with ease. He always knew exactly what to say to make people smile, always knew how to maneuver so the advantage fell to him. I, Coulter, was just the gentle younger brother who preferred sitting in a corner reading books or playing with simple toys. From the start, we were as different as water and fire, and that difference gradually became a chasm between us. In our teenage years, I grew used to being compared without mercy. Every small achievement of mine was brushed aside by our father as if it meant nothing. I vividly remember the time I got the highest math score in 8th grade. I ran home, excited to show my parents, thinking I had finally made them proud. But my father, Thomas Harrington, only glanced at the test paper and said, "Good, but Andrew won the state math competition at your age." Andrew was always the standard, the ideal I was expected to chase but never reach. He seized every opportunity to make me look small and useless, like the time we played basketball in the backyard. He deliberately threw the ball too hard for me to catch, then laughed loudly. "Little brother, you need more practice or you'll always be the one left behind." At first, I thought those words were just sibling teasing, but gradually they sank into me, making me more insecure, more withdrawn. My parents, especially my father, always praised Andrew for his cleverness, calling him the golden boy of the family. I learned to stay silent, to accept second place. As adults, Andrew left home early, declaring he would make a name for himself in the wider world. "Stay here, Coulter, take care of Mom and Dad for me," he said with a confident smile, but I sensed the contempt behind it. He left, leaving me in the familiar silence of our heavy home, where our parents constantly lamented their promising eldest son. After that, we rarely stayed in touch, occasional phone calls during holidays or rumors from mutual friends. I heard whispers that Andrew had succeeded in financial investing, living a lavish life in New York with big deals and wide connections. I wasn't jealous, at least I didn't think so then. I was content with my life in Boston with a stable job and a small family. I recalled the time before all this when I was a financial analyst at a major firm in Boston. I was genuinely skilled, meticulous with numbers, and always highly regarded at work. Colleagues respected me for my accurate market trend predictions, and my boss once praised me in meetings. "Coulter, you're the backbone of the analytics team." In those days, I felt confident, like I was contributing something valuable. I loved the job, loved the feeling of solving complex problems and seeing everything fall perfectly into place. But then everything changed when Annie was born. After our daughter Annie came into the world, Victoria began rising rapidly in her career. She took on major projects, long business trips, and gradually became the CEO everyone admired. I realized our family needed someone stable at home, someone to care for Annie, take her to school, and keep the house warm and welcoming. So I quit my job to do that, to allow my wife to focus fully on growing the company. At first, that decision made me proud. I believed my sacrifice was necessary for our family's happiness. I loved being with our daughter, watching her grow day by day, loved cooking delicious meals and keeping the house tidy so Victoria could rest without worry when she came home. The mornings dropping Annie at school, the afternoons playing with her, all of it made life feel meaningful. I thought I was building a solid foundation for our love, that Victoria would appreciate that quiet support. But gradually, my silent sacrifice was mistaken for weakness. My kindness became an excuse for others to look down on me. Friends started giving me pitying looks. "Coulter, you're a stay-at-home dad now? Why not go back to work?" Even my parents chimed in. My father said, "Son, a man should be out earning money. Staying home like this isn't respectable." I tried to ignore it, focusing on family, but those words sank in, making me wonder if I was wrong. Victoria thanked me at first, but as she grew busier, her affectionate gestures became rarer. I still believed everything would be fine, that our love was strong enough to endure. Nearly 10 years later, 6 months before this heartbreaking event, Andrew suddenly showed up at my house. He arrived in a luxury car, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit, exuding the aura of a successful man everyone looked up to. "Little brother, I'm in the area for work, so I thought I'd drop by," he said, his smile brimming with confidence and a hint of boastfulness, as if showing off a trophy. I was surprised. We hadn't seen each other in person for years, but I welcomed him politely. I poured coffee, made small talk about his work and life, trying to keep the atmosphere friendly despite a vague unease in my heart. Andrew glanced around my tidy home with a half-praising, half-mocking smile. "The house looks cozy, little brother." Clearly the work of a diligent house husband. The words sounded like a compliment, but his tone made them bitter. He dropped sarcastic remarks, saying how lucky I was to marry a capable woman like Victoria, then smirked. "At least someone in this house knows how to make money, right?" I just smiled weakly, not wanting to argue, thinking he was joking as usual. But now, looking back, I realize Andrew was already involved with Victoria then. Those seemingly harmless comments were the tip of a deeper scheme. At that time, my wife was frequently away on business, meeting clients and attending late-night events she mentioned in passing. I still trusted her blindly, proud of my accomplished wife. I had no idea that all along Andrew had wormed his way into our lives, destroying it with the very charm and deceit our father had once praised. My father always said Andrew was the smart one who knew how to live, but now I saw it was just a mask for selfishness and cunning. He had exploited my trust, used Victoria's position to get close, and turned everything to ruins. Those memories sharpened the pain of this night. I sat there, fists clenched, tears streaming down my cheeks. How could my own brother do this? How could Victoria choose him over me? The living room felt suffocating, and I was trapped in an endless loop of painful memories. In the days after Victoria moved out, the atmosphere in the apartment turned unnaturally cold and silent, as if a part of the house's soul had been drained away. She packed her things quickly in just 2 days, taking suitcases of clothes and work documents, leaving empty gaps on the bookshelves and in the wardrobe. The cabinet doors creaked every time I accidentally opened them, a constant reminder of her absence. I was still in shock, feeling as though everything was just a terrible dream I would wake from any moment, but reality slapped me in the face with every passing hour. Still, I tried to stay calm so my daughter wouldn't notice the sudden change. Every morning I woke earlier than usual, preparing simple breakfasts with toasted bread, fried eggs, and fresh fruit. The things Annie loved. I forced a smile when waking her, saying Mom was on a long business trip and we'd be fine. Dropping Annie off at school, I held her hand tighter, hiding my sleep-deprived, red-rimmed eyes. "I love you," I whispered as I hugged her at the school gate, and Annie smiled innocently, suspecting nothing. But inside my pain was an open wound, bleeding drop by drop. When night fell, the house felt emptier than ever, like a cold cave devoid of human warmth. I sat alone on the sofa, staring at the wedding photo on the bookshelf, the picture of us beaming under golden sunlight on a Hawaiian beach, where we honeymooned 8 years ago. Victoria's face in the photo was still beautiful and happy, but now it only filled me with a hollow emptiness that engulfed my entire body. I wondered if that smile had ever been genuine, or if it was just a mask hiding secrets. Newspapers and social media began showing images of Victoria arm in arm with Andrew at social events, photos of them smiling radiantly that left me reeling every time I scrolled past. The first time I saw them was in an online business journal, Victoria in a stunning evening gown linking arms with Andrew at a charity gala in Boston. They gazed at each other affectionately, like a perfect couple, and the caption praised CEO Victoria Harrington and investor Andrew Harrington, the new power couple of the business world. My heart clenched, blood rushing to my head, forcing me to shut down the computer immediately. Friends and neighbors started whispering, making everything worse. Some showed pity openly, like the neighbor next door who sent over a plate of cookies with a note, "Hope you're okay, Coulter." Their eyes in the apartment hallway were full of sympathy, as if I were the victim of a great tragedy. Some old friends called to check in, but their voices were more curious than comforting. "Coulter, I heard the news. Are you okay?" "Victoria and Andrew, it's unbelievable." I avoided going out as much as possible, declining all meetups, wanting only to escape those prying stares. Every trip to the supermarket, I kept my head down, wearing sunglasses to avoid recognition, yet still felt the furtive glances. My life shrank to the 4 walls of the apartment, where I could cry alone without anyone seeing. One drizzly afternoon, when the loneliness became unbearable, I decided to visit my parents, clinging to a faint hope that they would listen, understand, hug me, and say everything would be okay. I drove through Boston's wet streets, gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to steel myself for the conversation. My father, Thomas Harrington, 68, a conservative former lawyer who valued status and reputation above all, was someone I once respected but also feared. He had always been proud of his firstborn, seeing Andrew as the ideal of success, while I was just the gentle son lacking drive and ambition. My mother, Matilda Harrington, 66, was kind but weak, rarely daring to oppose her husband, always trying to bridge the gap but often failing. Stepping into the old house on the outskirts, the familiar smell of coffee and baked cookies filled the air, but the atmosphere was heavy from the start. I sat on the living room couch, took a deep breath, and told them everything. Discovering Victoria's affair with Andrew, the night of confrontation, and the pain tearing me apart. My father listened, his face stern, then looked at me with eyes full of disappointment. "Andrew is still the success story that makes us proud. And you, Coulter? Staying home to do laundry and watch the kid while your wife earns the money. That's what you call being a man. You made yourself weak, so don't blame anyone else." His words stunned me like a stinging slap. I tried to respond, my voice trembling. "Dad, Andrew destroyed my family. He betrayed his own brother." But he waved it off, his tone harsh. "You should blame yourself for not being man enough to keep your wife. Andrew seizes opportunities. You're forever the one left behind." My mother sat beside him, tears in her eyes, but saying nothing beyond, "Don't make your father angry, Coulter. It'll pass. You need to be stronger." She held my hand briefly, but her eyes avoided mine, as if she agreed with him. I clenched my fists, blood rushing to my head, anger and shame surging. I stood up, staring straight into my father's eyes with a fury I'd never shown before. "You never understood me," I growled, then turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind me. It felt like losing another family, as if even my closest kin had turned their backs on me. On the drive home, under pouring rain, my heart overflowed with pain and humiliation. I realized not only my wife but my parents too had abandoned me, that I was truly alone in this storm. The car sped through blurred streets and I sobbed behind the wheel, wondering where my life was headed. In those days, the pain didn't fade. It only built up, waiting to explode. After the painful confrontation with my parents, I sank into a string of quiet days, trying my hardest to forget everything and hide the pain gnawing away at me day by day. I avoided contact with the outside world, focusing only on simple daily tasks. Waking early to brew coffee, making breakfast for Annie, taking her to school, then returning to the silent apartment to do housework. One morning, as I was getting ready to take her to school, a sudden knock at the door shattered the familiar calm of the apartment. I was tying Annie's shoes. She giggled because I got it wrong, and the knock made my heart clench. Who could be here at this hour? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady as I said to Annie, "Wait for Daddy a second, okay?" Then walked to the door. Standing before me were two uniformed police officers, a middle-aged man with a stern face and a younger woman with sharp eyes. They introduced themselves as detectives from the Boston Police Department and said they were investigating a financial fraud case involving Andrew Harrington, my brother. The words hit me like an electric shock, freezing me in place, my hand still gripping the doorknob. Financial fraud? Andrew? I had never imagined it, even though I knew he was always clever and scheming. But now, after everything that had happened, the thought sent chills down my spine. Stunned and confused, my mind spun with questions. Andrew Harrington? My brother? What are you talking about? I stammered, trying to stay calm so Annie wouldn't hear from the other room. The male detective explained briefly. They were tracking suspicious transactions linked to Andrew's investment firm, and since I was family, they wanted to know if I had any information. I immediately confirmed I had no involvement in Andrew's work. We rarely spoke, and I had never been part of any of his deals. "I only know he's an investor, but no details," I said, my voice trembling slightly from the shock. The female detective nodded, handed me a business card with her name and number, and said to contact them if I remembered anything useful. They didn't press, just politely said goodbye and left, leaving me standing there with the card in hand, feeling like a time bomb had just been armed. After they left, I closed the door, leaned against the wall, and sat in silence for a long time, staring at the card. The name, Detective Laura Jenkins, was printed clearly, along with the Boston Police Department emblem. A sense of unease rose inside me, as if a dark door had just cracked open, revealing secrets I had never dared to imagine. Andrew, my brother, the one who always boasted of his success, now under investigation for fraud. The thought made my skin crawl and curiosity began to creep in. I took Annie to school as usual, but my mind wasn't there. I smiled mechanically when saying goodbye, then returned home with a vague resolve. I needed to find out more. Not for revenge, but because I needed the truth to close this wound. Curiosity turned to suspicion, and I began digging into public information about Andrew's company. I sat at the computer, hands shaking as I typed Harrington Investments into the search bar. His website came up first, sleekly designed with a modern interface, luxurious colors, and photos of high-end New York offices, walnut desks, premium leather chairs, and young, smiling employees in suits. The homepage featured glowing articles with headlines like Andrew Harrington, the genius investor of the new generation, or Harrington Investments leads sustainable investment trends. But the deeper I dug, the more it felt like surface polish. No specific address was listed, just a P.O. box and a mobile number. No public financial reports, no real project lists, and links to partners led only to generic websites. I clicked through page after page, my pulse quickening, feeling like I was peeling back a fake facade. Was it all an illusion? I checked the New York State Business Registry, where Andrew claimed his company was based. After a few clicks and searches, the results left me stunned. The company had been formed just over a year ago with no tax filings, no official employee roster, and an office address in a short-term rental building in Manhattan. The kind startups rent by the hour for photos. No signs of real operations, no SEC investment licenses, everything existing only on paper. I sat there, staring at the screen, breathing heavily. My unease had turned into clear suspicion. Andrew wasn't the successful investor he claimed to be. He was hiding something much bigger. To confirm, I called an old college friend in finance, Mark, a guy I trusted, now an analyst at a major bank. We hadn't spoken much, but I knew he was reliable. "Mark, do you know anything about Andrew Harrington?" "My brother," I asked after some small talk. Mark hesitated, then sighed. "Coulter, I don't want to badmouth your family, but Andrew's name has come up in a few sketchy capital-raising schemes I've heard about. He promises high returns to investors, mostly successful women, then disappears before anyone investigates. Nothing big enough to hit the news, but in finance circles everyone knows to steer clear." His words exploded in my head like a bomb. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence, heart pounding. Suspense surged. Could Andrew really be a con artist? On social media, I dug deeper, scrolling through Andrew's Instagram and LinkedIn. He frequently appeared at lavish parties in New York or LA, posting photos with luxury cars, expensive wine, and especially with accomplished women. CEOs, entrepreneurs, female investors with captions like "honored to partner with an outstanding investor" or "meaningful dinner with the smartest woman I've ever met." Those photos chilled me. Andrew's confident smile, the women's affectionate gazes, what was behind it all? I clicked through every post, piecing together a dark picture. Some comments asked about investment projects, but Andrew always replied vaguely, promising to reach out privately. Suspicion turned to certainty. Andrew wasn't just a liar in the family, he was a professional con man, seducing and defrauding. He built the image of a charming, successful businessman to exploit the trust and admiration of high-achieving women, luring them into fake investments, then vanishing with large sums. As the pieces formed a complete picture, I slumped into the chair, mind reeling. Victoria was just Andrew's latest prey. She, with her CEO title and ambition, had fallen into the trap my brother had long been setting, just like the others before her. I imagined their meeting, perhaps at a business event, Andrew approaching with his charming smile, promising major investment in her company, then slowly infiltrating her personal life. 2 years. 2 years she was deceived, and I, the trusting husband, became the collateral victim. The pain now mixed with pity for Victoria, but also anger that she chose to believe him over me. My initial unease had become harsh reality, and I knew everything was about to collapse. But what would I do? Contact the police? Warn Victoria? My heart raced, suspense building for the next step in this nightmare. I spent hours jotting down my findings, hands shaking as I wrote in a notebook. Fake website, shell company, fraud history. Everything fit perfectly. I recalled Andrew's visit 6 months earlier with his luxury car and mocking words. Now I saw it as him checking if I suspected anything. He had sat in my home, drunk my coffee while destroying my life. The thought made me want to smash the screen. But I held back, for Annie. She was the only reason I stayed sane. In the following days, I kept digging, searching for more evidence. I looked up old articles on fake capital raising in New York and found similar cases, charming men scamming wealthy women. Mark emailed more info. I heard Andrew was sued in California, but the case was dropped for lack of evidence. Each new discovery shocked me more, suspense rising like a dangerous game. Finally, when the full picture emerged, I realized Victoria wasn't the first victim, and probably not the last. She had sold her soul to a con man, and now I was the only one who knew the truth. But would she believe me? That thought kept me awake that night, pain building into resolve. After many days of agonizing, lying awake in bed with swirling thoughts, I decided I had to meet Victoria one more time. I no longer had any feelings for her. Love had died the night she removed her wedding ring and left without a trace of regret. But a sense of responsibility and compassion remained, a part of me I couldn't erase. I couldn't stand by and watch her continue falling into Andrew's trap, couldn't let her lose everything without warning even after her betrayal. The thought of Annie tormented me too. She was our daughter, and if Victoria collapsed, Annie would suffer. I sat up in the middle of the night, grabbed my phone and texted her, "We need to meet. It's important. About Andrew, not personal." The message sent into the darkness, and I waited for a reply with a pounding heart. Suspense building, like stepping into a battle I wasn't sure I'd win. The next morning, she replied curtly, "My office, 3 p.m. tomorrow." No extra words, but enough to show she still controlled everything, or at least tried to. I prepared thoroughly for the meeting, printing all the documents I'd gathered, copies of Andrew's business registration, old articles about similar scams, and screenshots from his social media. I placed everything in a thin folder, hands trembling as I organized it. The night before, I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling and imagining every possible scenario. Would she believe me or think I was just jealous? The next morning, I took Annie to school with a forced smile, hugging her tighter than usual, then drove to Victoria's office building. The Boston wind was still biting, but today it cut like a knife, reminding me of my last visit, with the shattered birthday cake. I took a deep breath, entered the lobby, and this time the guard recognized me, nodding without questions. I rode the elevator, heart racing, suspense mounting with each floor. Stepping into her office, I saw Victoria still carried her familiar confidence, cold eyes and strong posture, as if nothing in the world could touch her. She sat behind the large desk in a tailored gray suit, hair in a high bun, with a polite but distant smile. The glass building sparkled in the afternoon sun, and her office remained a symbol of success. Polished wooden desk, shelves full of documents, and a view of the bustling city. But to me, it was all an empty shell. "Coulter, you're here. Sit," she said flatly without warmth. I sat across from her, feeling like I was facing a stranger, the woman who once shared my bed, now impossibly distant. I inhaled deeply, trying to stay calm, but my hands gripped the folder tightly. I got straight to the point, no beating around the bush. "Victoria, the police are investigating Andrew. They came to our house asking about him, a financial fraud case. I looked into it, and I have information showing Andrew is scamming people, using you to take your assets. He's not a real investor, it's all a front." My voice shook slightly at the end, but I looked her in the eye, hoping for hesitation. The air in the room grew heavy, suspense rising like a bomb about to explode. I waited for her reaction, heart pounding, wondering if she'd see the truth. Victoria stared at me with clear suspicion, her blue eyes narrowing, then suddenly let out a dry, mocking laugh that chilled me. "Coulter, what are you talking about? Have you lost your mind from jealousy? You can't accept being left behind, so now you're making up stories for revenge." Pathetic. Her words cut like a knife, reviving old pain, but I held back, refusing to let emotions take over. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, looking like she was hearing a joke from a stranger. Blood rushed to my face, but I kept my voice steady. "It's not like that, Victoria. I feel nothing for you anymore, but I don't want you to be scammed. Listen to me." I placed the folder on the desk, Andrew's business registration, proving it was a shell company with a short-term rental address, and photos I'd downloaded of my brother at lavish parties with other women. My voice calm, but eyes determined, I explained every detail. Andrew's company exists only on paper, no real operations. He's been involved in fake capital raising in California. These women, they were victims before you. He exploits their trust, seduces them, then takes their money. I pushed the folder toward her, hoping she'd examine it. see the truth I'd spent days uncovering. Victoria glanced at the papers indifferently, flipped a few pages, then pushed them away like trash. Do you think I'm that stupid? You're just trying to slander Andrew and ruin his reputation. All this can be faked. Anyone can print papers and download photos. You're jealous, Coulter, and it's making you pathetic. Her voice was ice cold without a hint of doubt, leaving me stunned. I tried to explain more, voice rising slightly with urgency. Victoria, check it yourself. Call his partners, look up the business registry. The police came to my house. They're not joking. Andrew is using you just like he used others. As I tried to continue, she suddenly stood up. Eyes like ice, voice sharp as a blade. Enough! I don't want to hear another word from you. Do you think you're some hero saving the day? Or just a loser clinging on? Then she snatched the folder and threw it to the floor. The papers scattered, fluttering down around the desk, the rustling sound echoing in the suffocating silence. Get out of my life, Coulter. Dawn not come back. I stood frozen, no longer recognizing the woman before me. Victoria had changed. Or perhaps I never truly knew her. The confidence I once admired was now just a shell hiding cold arrogance, and my compassion evaporated, replaced by deep disappointment. I silently knelt to pick up the fallen papers, emptiness spreading through my body like all strength had been drained. My hands shook as I gathered them, and I said nothing more, knowing words were now useless. She had chosen to believe a liar over the man who had walked through hard years with her, who sacrificed his career to support her. I stood, looked at her one last time with regret in my eyes, then turned and left. The office door closed behind me, and I walked to the elevator with heavy steps, suspense lingering. Would she call me back? But nothing happened. Leaving the building, I looked through the glass walls and saw Victoria still at her desk, back to the window, working as if our meeting was just a minor interruption. I thought she still didn't realize. All she was trying to hold on to would soon collapse, and this time I couldn't save her again. 6 months passed since the divorce was finalized, and I gradually regained a normal rhythm in life, though at first it seemed impossible. Those cold legal documents, our signatures on the asset division agreement, custody terms, quietly closed 8 years of marriage, just as Victoria had wanted. No scandal, no noise. I received the house, the $2 million, and Annie, things she thought could compensate for betrayal. But to me, they were just numbers and soulless objects, unable to fill the void in my heart. In the early months, I lived like a shadow, waking each morning with a heavy feeling, but gradually I learned to adapt. I started with small things, reorganizing the house, removing items that reminded me of Victoria, like her favorite coffee mug or the wedding photos on the wall. I replaced them with Annie's hand-drawn pictures, fresh flowers from the local market, and slowly the house grew warmer in our own father-daughter way. I no longer cried every night. Instead, I focused on building a new life, simple but solid, where pain no longer controlled everything. I spent more time caring for my daughter than ever, turning moments with Annie into the only strength that helped me endure. Every morning I woke early to prepare nutritious breakfasts, egg sandwiches with fresh vegetables and a fruit smoothie she loved. Annie was now 8, growing fast, and she started asking about her mother more, but I always answered gently, "Mom's busy with work, but she loves you very much." On weekends, we strolled through the nearby park where Annie ran around with a ball, and I sat on a bench watching her laugh with a strange warmth in my heart. I learned new recipes to make her happy. From simple Italian pasta I found online to chocolate cookies she kneaded herself. Those afternoons in the kitchen with flour on our hands and her laughter helped me forget some of the pain. I even enrolled in an online cooking class, not to become a chef, but to create more joy for us. Annie eagerly helped, and in those moments I felt life slowly reviving, even if only in small pieces. Besides that, I started working part-time at a small coffee shop near home. A peaceful place with the aroma of freshly ground beans and familiar regulars. The shop sat on a street corner with an old wooden sign and rustic tables where people came to relax, not rush. I worked the afternoon shift, brewing coffee, serving toast, and chatting with customers about trivial things. News about Victoria appeared sporadically in the press like fragments of an old life I stumbled upon. The first time I saw an article on a business news site. CEO Victoria Harrington sells entire company to major corporation, liquidates assets, and announces shift to personal investing. I skimmed it, heart tightening slightly at her confident smile in the boardroom photo, but quickly closed the tab. She had sold the company, her brainchild she once poured her soul into, and used the money to invest with Andrew, as she had said. I wasn't surprised, but the thought made me tense, wondering if she had realized the scam. Subsequent articles grew scarce. A short magazine interview where she spoke of a promising new journey, then nothing. Soon all information about her vanished completely. No more TV interviews, no social media updates, no trace of the grand projects she once boasted about. My life, though simple, was more peaceful than ever. I no longer dwelled on the past or lost sleep over painful memories. Each day I woke to Annie's smile, took her to school, worked at the cafe, then came home to cook dinner. We developed new routines. Weekend library trips to borrow books or planting vegetables on the small balcony. Annie grew quickly, starting piano lessons, and I sat beside her as she practiced, filled with pride. I learned to forgive myself, accepting that my past sacrifices weren't mistakes but lessons. Life was no longer hell. It was a gentle river where I focused solely on being a good father, raising my daughter in love and stability. Until one pouring afternoon when a knock at the door changed everything. Boston's sky was gray, rain pattering on the roof, and I was at the kitchen table helping Annie with math. The knock, soft but persistent, made my heart race unnaturally. I stood, wiped my hands on the apron, and opened the door with a vague premonition. When the door swung open, I froze, stunned in place. Before me was Victoria, the once confident, powerful woman now unrecognizable in her frailty. She was gaunt, face hollow with new wrinkles, eyes sunken from sleeplessness, hair disheveled and soaked. Her clothes were worn, no longer the elegant suits, and she shivered in the cold rain. I stood speechless, throat dry, suspense building as I waited for her to speak. This was Victoria, my ex-wife who left without looking back, now standing here like a ghost from the past. I said nothing but invited her in, closing the door against the wind and rain. She stepped inside, rainwater dripping from her coat onto the floor, and sat on the sofa, exhausted. Annie looked at her mother in surprise and ran to hug her, but I held her back, whispering, "Go play in your room, sweetie. Daddy needs to talk to Mom." Annie obeyed, and when we were alone, Victoria began speaking, voice trembling and broken. "Coulter, Andrew, he scammed me. I sold the company, gave him all the money to invest, but he drained the accounts and disappeared. I have nothing left. No home, no money, just a few clothes." She detailed it, how Andrew convinced her to make a big investment in his project, how he vanished after taking the money, and how she discovered the fraud when the bank called. Her voice choked, and I listened silently, feeling a mix of pity and disappointment. I remembered warning her in her office, the folder on the desk, and now everything had unfolded as I predicted, but too late. Pity because she was once the woman I loved, disappointment because she chose that path. She burst into sobs, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks, voice breaking. "I was wrong, Coulter. I regret it so much. I just want a chance to start over. Please forgive me and let me come back. We can rebuild the family, for Annie, for everything." Her words made the air heavy, suspense rising like a dramatic climax. I looked at her for a long time, studying the once familiar features, but inside I felt only emptiness. Love had died with the lies long ago, the night she removed her ring and left. I felt nothing but weariness. I spoke gently but firmly. "Victoria, everyone pays for their choices. I warned you, but you chose to believe him. Now I just want peace with Annie. You should go." She bowed her head, tears still falling, then stood silently and left into the downpour. I closed the door behind her, standing still for a long while, watching the rain fall endlessly outside the window, drops sliding down the glass like her tears. I knew this time she had truly lost everything: company, money, reputation, and any chance to turn back. I turned inside, hugged Annie, and read her a story. But in my heart, another chapter had closed. The pain was no longer sharp, just a lesson, and I moved forward, hoping peace would stay forever. 1 year passed since the day Victoria appeared in the rain, and my life gradually stabilized, as if time had gently healed the deepest wounds. I was no longer the Coulter of the past, the man who collapsed from betrayal and loss, but now a single father living simply yet fully. With the money from the divorce settlement, I decided to open a small coffee shop on a quiet suburban street corner in Boston, where traffic was minimal and trees stayed green year-round. The shop was named Anne's Corner, after my daughter, with a rustic wooden sign, small tables by the glass windows, and the warm aroma of freshly ground coffee. At first, business wasn't easy. I had to learn brewing from scratch, order supplies, and greet the first customers with a forced smile. But gradually, the shop became part of the neighborhood, a place where people stopped by to chat, read, or simply enjoy a hot latte. I woke early each morning, opened at 6 a.m., and felt peace watching the morning sun stream through the windows, casting shimmering patterns on the wooden floor. Those moments let me know I had truly revived, no longer haunted by old pain, only joy from daily small things. My daughter was now 9, an indispensable companion in this new life. Annie grew quickly with long, shiny hair and a radiant smile like her mother's once was, but with a gentle, thoughtful nature like mine. She helped serve customers on weekends or free afternoons, carefully carrying trays of coffee to tables or making simple chocolate cookies from recipes we learned together. "Daddy, I made this for the lady at table 3. She likes sweets," she'd say excitedly, and I'd smile, teaching her to decorate with tiny chocolate sprinkles. We lived simply but fully. Home-cooked meals, walks in the nearby park, and evenings by the fireplace reading together. No more long business trips or pressure for fame. Our life was more peaceful than ever before. I taught Annie about kindness, about forgiving but not forgetting lessons, and she listened with wide eyes, making me proud for shielding her from the adult storm. In those moments, my heart felt light, as if the old burdens had been carried away by the wind. I no longer dwelled on the past, pushing it into a hidden corner of my mind to focus on the present. Each morning I woke early to open the shop, wiped the counter, brewed the first batch of coffee, and watched the sunrise through the glass, feeling an extraordinary calm. That light reminded me life goes on, that after the rain comes a rainbow. Regular customers started coming. The retired man who sat in the corner reading the paper, the young couple who always ordered twin lattes, or students studying with headphones. One evening, as I cleaned up after closing, a news broadcast from the small TV in the corner suddenly changed everything. I was wiping tables, the scent of coffee still lingering, when the anchor's grave voice caught my attention. Breaking news. Andrew Harrington, renowned investor, arrested in Florida on charges of fraud and money laundering. I froze, turned sharply to the screen, heart pounding like a drum. Images of my brother being escorted by police appeared. Andrew with a gaunt face, hands cuffed, wrinkled suit, leaving me speechless, a mix of pain and relief surging. Pain because he was still blood. Relief because justice had finally come. I slumped into a chair, hands shaking as I turned off the TV, but the image lingered. Suspense rose. Was this the end? Was everything truly closed? The press reported details in the following days, and I couldn't avoid reading them. Major outlets published. Numerous female victims came forward recounting how Andrew seduced them with his successful businessman image, promised high returns from fake investments, then drained their money and vanished. The stolen amount reached millions, from CEOs like Victoria to other wealthy women in New York and California. Andrew faced long-term imprisonment, likely 10 to 20 years, for organized fraud and laundering through offshore accounts. I read those articles with mixed emotions: anger for the lives he ruined, pity for the clever boy our parents once boasted about. But deep down, I felt unburdened. Justice had arrived, and I no longer carried the truth alone. The news spread, and my cafe grew slightly busier with people gossiping. But I stayed silent, smiling as I served and avoiding the topic. In the days after, I heard rumors that Victoria now worked for a small company on the outskirts of Boston, living quietly, avoiding the public in a struggling, lonely life. She rented a tiny apartment, worked as an office clerk with just enough to live, no trace of the powerful CEO. Old friends said she rarely socialized, avoided events, and seemed to be trying to forget the past. I wasn't surprised. After losing everything to Andrew, she had to start from zero. The thought pained me briefly, but I didn't reach out. Everyone must bear their own choices. As for my parents, learning their eldest son was arrested crushed them completely. They had bragged to neighbors about their successful son, but now the Harrington family name they cherished was a joke. The press mentioned the family, and neighbors whispered, "Their son scammed millions." My father, Thomas, aged visibly, went out less. My mother, Matilda, cried more. They called a few times, voices trembling about the gossip, but I listened without comment. Then one afternoon they came to my cafe. Their faces were worn, tired, with deeper wrinkles and slower steps. They sat at a corner table. My father looked around with distant eyes, then said, "Coulter, we're sorry. Andrew, he ruined everything. We're struggling now. Neighbors talk. Money's gone. Help us. Lend a little to get through our final years." I listened calmly, eyes steady, no longer angry, just distant. I poured them coffee, sat across, and said gently, "Mom, Dad, I fulfilled my duty as a son long ago. I've forgiven, but now I want my own life with Annie. You should take care of yourselves." My words made my father bow his head, my mother cry silently, but I didn't waver. They left afterward, and I cut contact, never returning to the old house. No hatred remained in my heart, only release, as if the old wounds had finally scarred over, no longer painful. I continued living, with the cafe growing busier, Annie maturing, and true peace. Each night I closed the shop, looked at the Boston stars, and knew I had found real happiness, not in fame, but in the simplest things. Time passed gently, like autumn leaves falling slowly on the Boston sidewalks, and my life with my little daughter became more peaceful than ever. I was no longer Coulter Harrington, the man who once collapsed from betrayal and loss, but now Mr. Coulter of the neighborhood, the one who brews great coffee and listens to everyday stories. My life no longer involved long business trips or tense meetings. Instead, it was filled with early mornings, the aroma of freshly roasted coffee beans, and the lively chatter of regular customers. I understood that forgiveness is not about forgetting everything, but about choosing to let go so the heart can feel lighter, like releasing a balloon into the sky and watching it drift away. I no longer resented my parents, those who turned their backs on me in my darkest hour, who favored Andrew and belittled my sacrifices. I realized they too were victims of blind pride and misguided expectations of success, and now they were living with the consequences of their own making. I no longer held a grudge against Victoria, the woman who betrayed me, who chose Andrew over our family. She had paid the price with her own downfall, living in regret and solitude, and I hoped she would find her own lesson. And I no longer hated Andrew, my own brother who destroyed my life with lies and greed. He was now in prison, facing the consequences of his wrong choices, and perhaps that was life's way of teaching him. To me, forgiveness meant cutting the cords that bound me to the past, choosing not to let resentment dictate my future. I learned this through time, through long nights of reflection over a hot cup of tea, and through watching Annie grow up without carrying the burdens of adults. Forgiveness did not make me weak. On the contrary, it made me stronger, freer to live fully. Whenever I thought of them, I simply sent a silent wish for them to find their own peace. Then continued my day unburdened. Letting go was not easy. It required inner strength. But once achieved, my heart felt as light as a bird in the sky, ready to soar without entanglement. Those who had hurt me had all paid their price in their own way. like a fair cycle of life where every action has unavoidable consequences. Andrew, my brother, the clever con artist who once strutted confidently at lavish parties with his charming smile, was now serving a long prison sentence where he could no longer manipulate anyone with his schemes. Victoria, my ex-wife, the once ambitious betrayer with the perfect CEO image, now lived in regret, working quietly at a small company, avoiding the public and facing a loneliness she could never have imagined. I heard from old friends that she sometimes called Annie, her voice trembling as she asked about our daughter, but never dared to meet, as if the past still haunted her every day. As for my parents, who learned the lesson of pride too late, they now lived under the neighbor's scorn, the Harrington family name shattered like sea foam under the weight of scandal. They aged rapidly, rarely went out, and were perhaps reflecting on their past mistakes in favoring Andrew while overlooking me. I did not rejoice in this, not in a vengeful, gloating way, but simply saw it as the natural law. Every action has consequences, and life does not forgive blindness. Their fates made me reflect deeply, but no longer caused me pain. They were lessons, not burdens. I realized that justice does not always come quickly, but it will come. And my duty was to live without regret,